Hey, listeners, and welcome to the You Are Epic podcast. This is where we honour the people who've helped build not just our industry, but our communities. I'm Angela Hucker, and I am so glad that you're here. So, I'm taking the time to sit down with people who've been in construction for years, people who've been through the ups, the downs, and everything in between. You're going to hear real stories of resilience, growth, and moments that shaped who they are. This podcast is for those that want to learn more from people who've been walking this path for some time, and they're helping to lift up others and quietly making a difference along the way. It's also to show you that your journey matters and your voice matters. And in case you've forgotten, you are epic. Let's get into it. So today's guest is David Hellyer, an experienced HSE leader with over 40 years dedicated to safety across Australia's most complex construction projects. From high-rise towers in Sydney to rail, mining, highways, and oil and gas, David has seen it all. He brings deep expertise in behavioural safety, compliance, and culture change with a hands-on approach that resonates from the boardroom right through to the boots on the ground. A passionate mentor and strategic thinker, David's mission is simple: safety that inspires, connects, and drives real change. So thanks for joining us, David. It's a pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure to be part of this. I'm pretty chuffed, actually.
Awesome. So what we might do to start with is I'm always curious to understand how people get into this industry. So I'd like to know, how did you find this industry and how did you get started?
Well, when I was growing up, so I'll go back a step. I was born in Canberra. My mother was born in Canberra, so it's obviously my hometown. When I was growing up as a youngster, my mum and dad had a couple of small businesses, including you might remember the Golden Fleece brand of fuel. So they had a
Oh, yes,
Golden Fleece service station down at Bateman's Bay.
with the sheep as their logo.
The Merino, yeah,
Yes.
which are quite sought after collector's items these days.
Yes.
Um, so, but what happened to me as a young fella, I can remember that it just comes back to me vividly. Thinking about it, I had come home and I was about 7 years old, I think I was, 6 or 7, and I had a big bruise on my thigh, and I'd been to football training, and my mum spotted it when I was having a shower, and she said, "What have you done to yourself?" And it wasn't painful, it wasn't causing me any grief, and I said, "Oh, I don't know, I didn't even know it was there." Anyway, a few days later, it didn't seem to be getting any better. So my mum took me to the doctor, and I ended up being diagnosed with osteomyelitis, which is a
Okay.
disease of the bone.
All right.
So I ended up having to have some surgery, and then I had some more surgery, and it was all on my left thigh. So
Mm.
pretty well from my knee to my hip. Quite a scar there.
Wow.
And I can remember this part of that whole period because I wasn't able to, play sport.
Mm.
I didn't go to school. So I really missed out on the best part of my primary school years, not being at school and not doing alternative schoolwork as well. So I ended up leaving school when I was 14. And interestingly enough, the one thing that I could do was read and write. Um, but, I've missed out on all the other bits and pieces. So
Yeah.
in terms of getting into some work, there wasn't a lot of options, but there was options in terms of working in the building industry, just labouring type options at the time,
Yeah.
which I took. And my football coach, even though I wasn't allowed to play football at this stage, he was a plumbing contractor. and he gave me an opportunity to drive a backhoe for his company.
Oh, wow.
So I started to get interested in machinery, earth moving, and I went from one machine to another, right up to bulldozers and excavators and everything in between. And I really enjoyed that, and I was making reasonable money. Um, and so that was how I got a leg in the door, and I was never afraid to, you know, try another job or try another employer or another opportunity,
Mm,
which I've been doing right up until right now.
yeah. Your background with safety, how did you get into the safety side if you went from operating the
Yeah.
plant and equipment into the safety aspect?
Well, I believe that I was reasonably fortunate in that when I started work, it was around 1968, and the significance of that date is twofold for me. One is because I've just written a post that I'm going to do on LinkedIn in early September to jog people's memories that it's 55 years since the collapse of the Westgate Bridge.
Oh, wow. Geez, that's gone quick.
It has. And so I'd been working for 2 years when that happened. So that the actual bridge started construction around the time that I started in the industry.
Wow.
And
Okay.
2 years later, the bridge collapses, and, a terrible
Yeah.
outcome, to say the least. And so I remember that so much because on job sites, at least in the old days, there were guys that would make sure that you knew what happened. I mean, the building industry unions were strong, the BLF, etc. And so I got a little bit of an education from that. And I ended up meeting a number of the guys that actually worked on that bridge they were there when it collapsed, but they were they were several survivors.
Wow.
So I ended up going to Western Australia, and I only went over there to check out the fishing and have a look around. And ended up staying there for 10 years.
Yeah, right.
And 6 of those years were in the Pilbara. And when I went to the Pilbara, one of the things that struck me was that um, they didn't like people on their jobs who had anything to say about anything.
Mm.
And so how I became interested in safety was that, I mean, and I had an interest in it just from, your own personal well-being,
Mm.
but I was no expert at it. But I was working on a job it was an AV Jennings job. You know that company?
I do, yes.
And they were building a shopping centre in Karratha,
Okay.
which was quite something given what they had at the time, which was bugger all.
Yeah.
And and the shopping centre was a pretty basic design, but at both ends of the building, it had 2-story high brick walls. Now, I was working for the bricklayer, and I was driving a forklift. And my
Mm.
background in machines, they were looking for a forklift driver, and I started. And then things were going okay. It was not too bad. I didn't have a lot in common with the rest of the crew, I might add. They were a bunch of rednecks, and they saw me as an Eastern Stater. It was all that sort of
Yeah.
politics. Let alone, I'd hate to think how they would have treated a woman on the job. There wasn't any, but yeah, there wasn't any provision for them, I can assure you. Anyway, I happened to ask the bricklaying contractor as we started to go up on these two end walls, how did he expect that we were going to get the bricks up there? And he said, well, what I thought we would do is just get a pallet of bricks with the forklift, and you lift it as high as you can possibly lift it.
Oh my gosh.
And then you jump up on top of the pallet of bricks,
Oh my
which is
gosh.
suspended by the forklift, and throw them up to the bricklayers.
Oh
And
no.
I said, I'm not doing that.
Oh my
There's
gosh.
no way known I'm doing that. And he said, well, if you're not doing what you're told, you can fuck off. And I
Wow.
said, that right. And so I set up a one-man picket line.
A one-man picket line.
Sorry?
A one-man picket line.
A one-man picket line that
Yeah.
nobody observed. However, I just thought, well, I'm not moving. And I had the picket line in place for 2 or 3 days, and the whole town of Karratha was talking about this picket line. Because, who's this bloke? What's this picket line? This is
Yeah.
bullshit. And then a union organiser from Perth came and made himself known to me. And eventually, A.V. Jennings conceded, re-employed me, paid me my lost time. And then, not that long after that, because the job didn't go for much longer, the union offered me a job.
Oh wow.
And, I had no background in working as a delegate or as an organiser. And I ended up as a full-time delegate for the union on the Northwest Gas Shelf project, the Woodside project.
And what union was that one?
Well, it was the building trades union. So
Ah, yes.
it was pre-CFMEU,
Yes.
but it included the Transport Workers Union, the FEDFA, the BWIU, and then a little later the BLF. The BLF didn't have much coverage on this type of project because it wasn't a building site; it was an infrastructure site, if you like. But it
Yeah.
was the biggest. It was the biggest job in Australia at the time, construction-wise. Now, I don't know if you know much about the politics of Woodside in Western Australia, but they have a fair bit of influence. And there's a lot of people that don't know this side of me, but I took on the job with a gusto,
Yeah.
because I didn't like them. I didn't like their attitude. I didn't like what they stood for. I didn't like their politics. And I thought every opportunity I'm going to get, I'm going to remind them that I don't like them. And I did it in a pretty sophisticated way, I reckon. And then we had this is something that of all the things that I've done in my life, in my 72 years, this is one thing that I can sit back and no one can take this off me. And I did this pretty well, if you like, on my own. And so I'll tell you a little story. They had
Please.
a function to celebrate the shipping of gas to Japan, and that was the whole focus of this stage of that project, was making sure that they met these deadlines, etc., etc. And they managed to do that, and it was a fair effort. I must give them that. However, the thing that really pissed me off was at this function to celebrate the gas to Japan, they talked about everything you could imagine that they'd talk about. And then at the end, there was question time. And anybody got any questions? And I said, yeah, I have. I said, I find it remarkable that we've all got together here this afternoon. The press is here, the government's here, Woodside's here. We're all here to celebrate this milestone. And yet no one has mentioned the fact that 3 men have lost their lives during the achieving of that.
Mm.
And numerous people have been seriously injured, may never work again in their lives.
Mm.
And we've forgotten them. And I'm not happy with that at all.
Mm.
And as an end result, I put it on Woodside that they create a memorial at the visitors centre out the front of the project to honour those who have lost their lives and been seriously injured on this job.
Mm.
And Woodside's response to that was, "You're joking. We're not doing that." And I said, "Is that right?" "Oh, we'll see." So it was gloves off. Now, I could have had a mass meeting, and if you meet people who knew me at the time, I could get a mass meeting to do anything. I was fairly good at standing up on the back of a truck and influencing the crew on site, which was a few thousand people,
Yeah.
including some women, and actually a Swedish lady, Angie Svensson, who was the first woman in Western Australia to get her open crane licence.
Wow.
She also had a bit of a fling with the crane driver as well.
Well, that's just a side note. So,
well, that's what happened in the 70s, and 80s.
well, that's right. And it probably still happens today. So,
I went back to Woodside, and actually it ended up we met in their head office in Perth, and I put this to them: what I'm asking you to do is to open your eyes and maybe even open your hearts.
Yeah.
And one thing that Woodside really treasured was their influence in the community. And I said, I could just imagine the community being really wrapped in you guys when you say you're not interested in any shape or form of what I'm about to put to you. So I said, just be careful, because I'm not going to let this go. But this is what I believe we could do as a joint effort. And that was that there was a lady on the job, Jane Bailey, a lady in town. Her name was Jane Bailey. She was an artist and a teacher at the local school in Karratha. Her husband was a rigger on site, worked with one of the contractors there. I said, so we have an artist who could oversee the design and the building of this memorial. We've got the skills on the job. We don't have to get someone up from Perth to spend big money. We've got the boilermakers, we've got the riggers, we've got the crane drivers, we've got the materials, because there's so much material that gets wasted here that we can put to good use. And we can do it as a community arts project. So we can seek some funding, even though you guys have got more money than you know what to do with. We can seek some funding from the state government, the arts department of state government, so that it has their buy-in as well. Blah, blah, blah. So a community arts project is what I put to them. And they didn't agree at that meeting, but they did agree. And that sculpture is still there to this very day.
Awesome.
And it has a plaque associated with it, which just makes mention of what it's for.
Yeah.
And it's all built out of steel, and it's very abstract in its design. I always loved it myself.
Yeah.
And it's still there, as I say, to this day. And that was back in the late 80s. And I'd never done anything like that in my life.
Yeah.
I'd never, been in the boardroom of a major organisation like Woodside on my own and put that to them as something like that. And that was something that you might say, well, where did you get the idea from? When I was young, growing up around Canberra, one of the things that me and my dad and my brother used to do regularly was go up to the Snowy Mountains and camp and go fishing, trout fishing. And in Cooma, which is the capital of the Snowy Mountains, there is a memorial there, in honour of the original guys that built the Snowy originally. But there's a death toll of about 120 odd men that a lot of people aren't aware of.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's a really nice memorial.
Mm,
It's and it's been there a long time. So I was aware of that as a thinking, well, they did that
mm,
in Cooma. They did it as a result of the construction of the Sydney Harbour Bridge.
mm.
There was, I think, from memory, 16 men who lost their lives on that project.
Yeah.
Not all at once, but over a period of time. And then obviously the Westgate Bridge. As a young,
Mm,
I was well aware that they'd built a memorial which is still there today at the Westgate Bridge location. So those three projects were the inspiration, if you like.
yeah.
Um, and they were all, none of them have copied each other. They're all got their own idiosyncrasies. And
Yeah, of
uh,
course. But that's a classic example of what you've done. And as you said, like you'd never been in a boardroom, you'd never done anything like that, and it was just you with no one else there. And that's a classic example of standing in your truth and, stuff that is important to you and to be able to stand up for what's important to you. And you weren't doing this for you, as in David Hellyer, you were doing it for the people who'd been lost and weren't being recognized that they had lost their lives as a result of this project reaching their milestone,
yeah.
and you wanted to do something honorable in recognition of them, but you've stood in your truth to say, hey, we need to actually recognize people who can't be with us now, who've when we've reached this milestone. And that's a really important message because there's too many people who aren't prepared to stand up for what they believe in. I think that's just a real credit to you, David, with you coming from, and this isn't a criticism or anything, but you coming from the field and then having to then go and step into that boardroom. Like I can imagine that would have been, maybe a little bit intimidating and overwhelming because that wasn't the environment you were used to, but you still did it anyway. And that's something that's really important for this industry to be able to make change is about actually still standing up for what you believe in, regardless of how hard it is or that it's not your environment, because that's how change is going to happen, and you're proof of that.
Well, I was very determined within myself that one way or the other, I was going to achieve this. And
Yeah.
as I said earlier, I could have achieved it with some industrial action. I could have put that much pressure on Woodside that they would have bowed, but I didn't want to do that.
No,
I
because
wanted,
there's other ways to do it. You can still influence without that coercion tactic.
yeah, I wanted to convince them that, hey, this is a good idea.
Yeah.
And yeah, I firmly believe it. And I think it's not a bad effort from a bloke who left school when he was 14 with bugger all education. I've managed that. I'd like to think that just about everything that I've done, Ange, in my life has been self-taught.
Well, I think it's a real credit to you, and regardless of what your education or your background is, you've done it from a different place. You've done it with heart and with empathy and with care and compassion, and that's way more valuable than an education because it comes from a different place. So that's a credit to you. And education, at the end of the day, you can have all the education in the world, you can have all the degrees in the world. It still doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a good human and stand up for others, which is what you've done.
And one of the nicest comments I've ever had from a group of guys when I went to work at Barrow Island. So I went to Barrow Island in 2012, and I did a couple of years there with Leighton's. And I'd only been on the job about 2 or 3 days, stinking hot, and I was in the queue to get a cold beer, and I could sense that there were a few tables of different guys checking me out. Not that it bothered me. I just thought, oh, yeah. And I sort of didn't recognise anybody. Anyway, I got my beer, and as I was walking back to where I was sort of converging, a guy on one of the tables said, "Hey, mate, Yeah. So, are you Dave Hellyer? And I said, I am. And he said, yeah, we were sitting here. We weren't quite sure if it was you, but I was fairly sure. Um, how are you? And I said, well, I'm pretty good, thanks. And yourself? And I said, well, I don't know you guys. Where should I know you from? I said, mate, we all worked on the Northwest Gas Shelf project when you were there as the organizer.
Mm,
And every single man on this table, to a man, has said, do you remember how good he was? And we just wanted to thank you
mm,
for the job you did. And
nice.
oh, wow. I said, I wasn't sort of expecting that, but that's nice to hear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's lovely. That's lovely. So, on that note, what would be when you think back of your career, and thank you for sharing your story about Woodside, and with that as well, that is a recognition as to the type of person who you are, which we need more people in the industry like you, I can say that. But when you think back on your career, what's a moment that you're most proud of? Because you've had a pretty extensive career, and is there something that jumps out as, this is a moment that just will always stick in my mind?
There's lots of things. There's lots of
Yeah.
things. I, in terms of being proud of what I've enjoyed over the years is I'd like to think that my approach in dealing with people in general is to treat people with some respect.
Mm,
And the amount of times where I've had guys come up to me, not just guys either, guys and gals, who have come up to me after a mass meeting, a toolbox meeting, a pre-start meeting, or where we've had an accident and there's been some feedback. I've really enjoyed that side of the job when I was working as a union organizer,
mm,
was being able to educate people. And the amount of feedback that I got was really what not drove me, but certainly it, I knew that I was getting somewhere. And because people come up and say things such as, mate, can I just say to you, that toolbox meeting that you held this morning, I've been in this industry most of my life, and I have never heard somebody deliver a toolbox meeting like you did. That was just mind boggling how well you spoke. And mate, even though I've been in the industry a long time, I learnt so much from that 10 or 15 minutes that you spoke there. I just wanted to say, mate, that was brilliant. Well, I got that sort of feedback quite regularly over quite a number of years, and I doubt whether there was too many union officials who got the same thing.
mm, yeah.
Um, so, that's certainly something I'm proud of. But even as a 72-year-old bloke, um, just doing the newsletter that I'm doing,
Yeah.
because I enjoy putting that together, and I've really enjoyed again the feedback from people, because I've never seen a newsletter like the one I do,
No.
and I can remember, when I was young, you could go into a newsagent's and buy, like, well, I forget what they used to call them, but they were like, it's like a boy's own annual, where it was all sorts of stories and pictures and
Oh,
and
yeah. Yeah.
and I used to get into them big time. I used to love them, and just good information. But again, a picture tells a thousand words.
It
And
sure does.
I've done the piece on, saying to you, on the the Westgate Bridge, and it's actually 3 or 4 pages. Um, and I'm going to release it at the time when I release my newsletter on that same morning.
Okay.
In the newsletter, I've got a piece on the memorial on the collapse, but
Mm,
most of the focus in the newsletter is about what those poor buggers had to endure that day and
mm,
what they endure to this day.
mm.
It doesn't go away.
No, it doesn't
And
go.
the other one that I'm is more about the overall picture of what happened, including the Royal Commission and some pretty appropriate photos that I've managed to get hold of, that are black and
Okay.
white photos from the day.
Yeah.
Um, and I've tried to write it in such a way that, well, I have written it in such a way that when people read it, I'm hoping that they would see it as something that they could use to have a toolbox meeting on their site,
Yeah, something that they can relate to.
to remind people of what's happened, because so many things safety wise that we take a little bit for granted these days came from that incident,
Mm,
the follow up, because it took them another 8 years to finish that bridge after that collapse.
wow.
And some of Australia's most recognised building industry union officials worked on that bridge.
Mm,
So that's where a lot of that mentoring that went on in smoko sheds for years.
yeah.
And I used to love that side of things, listening to stories and being, informed and made aware of, that's where my politics come from. It came from the music of John Lennon, and
Oh, yes.
it came from, delegates in the building industry in the early days. And I think I sent you a copy of that first newsletter that I did,
You did, yes. Thank you.
and I made tried to introduce myself a little bit in that newsletter.
Yeah.
Do you remember that I put that list of that I was born in Australia before,
Yeah, before this, and this.
and like, I don't think people quite appreciate unless they get to read something like that. That, geez, life has changed.
It
So I was
has.
born before penicillin, before colour television, before the
Yep.
Beatles,
Yep.
before credit cards, before frozen foods, before Xerox, because I've got it in front of me as I'm speaking to you.
As you're speaking.
Before
There's
contact lenses, frisbees, the pill, dishwashers, clothes dryers, and the list goes on.
all the stuff. All the
And
stuff.
then in the other side, that when I started working construction, there's no such thing as a resume, a white card, site
No,
inductions, PPE. None of that existed when I started work.
no,
Like,
and
even,
that's where the industry's definitely changed immensely, especially with that safety side and stuff as well, and things like the Westgate Bridge and different bits and pieces of what's happened in the time to have a bit more focus on safety as well.
and I suppose the other thing that I should maybe make you aware of as well is that I spent 30 years of my life contributing stories and photos to, oh, probably a dozen different publications around the country. So motorcycles, tattooing, rock and roll, body piercing, trucks, earth moving equipment, you name it. I've
All
written
sorts of
stories.
stuff.
Sorry?
All sorts of stuff. That sounds great.
Yeah, that's.
If we were to look back at the construction industry, like in the time that you've been in it and the experience that you've got, what is if there was one thing that you think the industry could do better moving forward, what would that be?
Oh, I think if they concentrated a bit more on better support for those who are looking after the jobs, like
And what would that
supervision.
look like?
Well, there's not too many supervisors that have the confidence, and I've met a few, but there's not many of them that have the confidence to be themselves and try and put it in words. So many of them go to a pre-start, right, or a toolbox in the morning. I've always thought that mechanism, that pre-start in the morning, you can achieve so many things if you know how to do
Yeah.
that. If you know, so that all those guys that you're having the pre-start with, if you're able to influence them enough that at the end of the pre-start they walk away supporting you, confident in you, confident that they can go to you
Mm.
and teach them things.
Yeah.
That's been missing all my working life. And that's probably why I've done what I've done, because I believed in it and I stepped in and did it myself.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I
But
love that. And
and
it's so valuable because there's so many people who are put, especially now with there's obviously huge labor shortage and stuff, and there's lots of people being put into those middle level management roles who've come up from a trades role and aren't actually being given those skills and tools and just different things that they need to do to be able to influence and be effective with the people that they're looking after.
yeah, and exactly. And in the old days, and you know, we didn't talk about mental health because there was no such thing. When I say there was no such thing, we weren't aware that there was such a thing.
There was a thing, it just was never spoken about because there was quite a stigma, but because it was, okay, you injured yourself, and even when you injured yourself physically, it's like, well, just keep going, suck it up and keep going.
Yeah,
So to talk about mental health, I mean, people would think you were a little bit cuckoo if you said that there was something wrong with you mentally because it's like, oh, you need to go to an asylum then or
yeah.
a mental institution. Like it's,
Or you just cop things like you're a weak bastard.
yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't. I must say to you that I didn't cop virtually any of that in my working life.
I can't see you being a weak bastard, David. So
I just wouldn't put up with it. I just no.
no, I could not see that happening at all.
But again, you know, I'm pretty proud of myself in that there were many times when I could have quite easily just smacked someone in the head,
Yeah.
but I never did, and I never have.
Mm.
So I never laid a hand on anybody in all those years where I, were in fairly powerful positions in some situations, and I was on many jobs where I was a very big influence. But
Yeah.
I thought I did very well in how I used that influence.
But it comes back to what you said earlier, which is that respect, and it's treating people with respect. So even though you had a power that could be exerted, you maintained respect.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And
And that's the missing piece that's in the industry at the moment is there's a lot of people who've got the power, but they're actually not being respectful with how they're using that power towards others.
uh, exactly. I drove onto the Northwest Shelf project at about 6:30 one morning, or many mornings, but this particular morning, to be confronted just outside as you go in the gates. There's this huge billboard, like the size of a billboard you'd see in Sydney and Melbourne.
Mm.
You know, big billboard with a big poster of some sort on it. Well, this poster, I was amazed, depicted safety by using a scantily clad young woman in some frilly knickers standing on
My God.
like a wharf, and just near her was a crane working. And the crane driver, instead of looking at what he was doing, was perving on this young girl. And the wording was, keep your mind on the job, work safe.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I thought to myself, well, I can't be too critical. They've tried hard to put, because I was into them about advertising safety, you know.
Mm.
So this was their first go at it, and I went in and seen them, and I bullshitted to them, to the management. I said, "Gents, I've just come through the gates and seen your new billboard. You've got to be kidding me. You've really got to be kidding me. Have you seen it? Have you read it? Have you looked at it? You got to take it down. You got to take it down today."
Mm.
Because I've been confronted by numerous guys that have said they're very upset about it,
Mm.
to be put in a category that's how they would approach safety.
Mm.
I said you will get in a lot of trouble unless you get rid of it now. So they did get rid of it, but I came through the gates about 3 hours later, and here they had an old tip truck backed right up against the side of the billboard, and there's this guy standing on the hungry boards of this tip truck with a scalpel or a scraper, trying to get this bloody poster off the
Oh
billboard,
my
and
gosh.
putting himself at risk of falling about probably 4 meters in doing so. And I got out of my car and said, "Mate, can you get down off there, please, and move your truck, and we'll get some scaffold built here, and we'll get this done safely." And I went back in to see the management and said, "Guess what I've just seen?" And
Yeah.
one of those times when you wish you had a smartphone, because you could have run off
Taking a
and
photo. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for always being the person who's standing up, you know, for these sorts of things. I mean, I think that's incredible, and it's a good message that this is what more people need to be doing is standing up. So, in closing, what I'd like to ask you is if you if there was one thing that you could say where you've gone, if I could just say this to people, and it may be just a word, a comment, a statement, a phrase, whatever it is, where you've just gone, there's just one thing I wish people would get, and you could say that, what would it be?
Well, you might have already seen it on some of my posts. I often have a catch cry at the bottom which said, "Don't learn safety by accident."
Yeah.
You know, think about it. Um, which is the same. Which is the same with health. And I put myself in this situation nearly 10 years ago. On a Sunday morning, I went to. I used to smoke rollies, right? So I went to have a rollie, and I was in the backyard. I remember this clearly, Ange. And I thought, I haven't got enough tobacco here to roll a decent cigarette. I better go and get some more tobacco. And then I said to myself, no, I'm not. I've had it with the price of tobacco. It's about time I considered my long-term health.
Hmm.
So I'm going to stop smoking as of right now.
Wow.
And I stopped smoking and I stopped drinking. And I wasn't much of a drinker anyway.
Hmm.
And I haven't touched either since that morning, which
Wow.
was really 10 years ago.
Okay, great.
Uh, and I'm so glad with myself that I finally did that.
Yeah.
The other thing that I did was just little things, and I don't know how you put this into words, but I'm just a great believer that a lot of people and a lot of men just don't do those little things. And here's an example. I thought to myself, I use sugar tabs
Oh, yes.
instead of sugar,
Yes.
and because I'm a coffee drinker, I love my coffee, and I thought to myself, why are you putting 2 tabs in a cup of coffee? Why don't you just put one in?
Yeah.
And I did that morning, one, and I've never done anything but one since, and it adds up.
It
So
does.
4 cups of coffee a day, that's 4 tabs that you're not having, times in a week, that's 30,
Yep.
times a month, and suddenly in a year, yeah, it's just, I think it was 1,500 um, spoonfuls of sugar that you've cut out of your diet.
Simple things like that is easy to do once you can actually just train your brain to do it.
Absolutely. And then so I followed it up with two more things. I had a habit of always having some chocolate in my fridge.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have chocolate in my fridge. I love chocolate, but I don't have it anymore.
Okay.
And
Awesome.
that was well over a year ago. And
Yeah.
I'd always have some biscuits, like, some Tim Tam biscuits or
Yeah.
something. And I thought, why you got them in there, Dave? You don't need them. And so I don't have them either. Just
Mm.
as examples of just, thinking about it and going, well, it's not that hard to do it. And
Yeah.
once you do it, it's not hard to do because you couldn't be bothered with a block of chocolate or a Tim Tam or another sugar, you know. And so I've done a fair bit of that with my health, and I cook for myself every day. Well, I
Nice.
don't cook every day because I cook so that I can have two or three feeds. But
Absolutely.
and so I had a friend stay the other night who's an Aboriginal lady who's the wife of my nephew's dad, and I've known her for quite a few years, and she lives out west. Well, whenever she's coming through Canberra, she always comes and stays with me, which is generally just the night. So we
Nice.
have a home cooked meal and a chat, and usually watch a bit of footy on the telly. And I made her I made some lasagna the other night because she likes my lasagna. Well, everyone likes my lasagna actually, and it was full of mushrooms, full of spinach, capsicum, um, onions, garlic, chili, vine ripened tomatoes on the top with some cheese. It's all gone. It's all gone.
Nice. Sounds lovely.
And I cook like that all the time. So I think that's been a big part of why I'm, still kicking along all right, health
But
wise.
it's about making those little changes and being intentional when you do it. So, and just following through with a little bit of getting the mind right and going, no, that's what I'm doing. Don't need
Yeah.
it anymore. So I just want to thank you for joining us. So thanks you so much for being a part of this. Really appreciate it. And thank you for, what you've done in the industry and standing up and, just being that person who just has that courage and does it on behalf of others. And you're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it for others. So we definitely need more people like you. So this is going to be a really valuable lesson for people. So thank you so much for joining us, David.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode today. I hope this conversation gave you something that you can take with you, whether it be a little bit of insight, inspiration, or maybe just a reminder that you're not alone. If it resonated with you, please share because we're better when we help build each other up. And remember that your experience, your story, and your journey, it all matters more than you know. Until next time, stay kind, stay connected, and never forget you are epic.